Today we're going to look at porpoises. I had a conversation with a porpoise, mentally, of course, and I'd like to share this with you. So I willed myself to be with this happy fellow. He says porpoises don't worry. They do feel sadness, but they don't try all the time to feel not joyous. He said maybe it's something in their makeup that they don't have as much capacity for sorrow and sadness as humans do, or even primates do. But he wants to tell me about his species and why this planet is theirs. It is because porpoises are closely linked to the evolution of the Earth, and they will be here with this planet as long as it is here. If you think about it, the changes that have happened on the planet have been changes in the land mass of the Earth. Oceans have always existed. You call it the water planet because it is predominantly water. So most of this planet is our domain. As you know, there are many types of us. We consider them many races of us, just as there are many types and races of humans. We are spread out all over the planet, and we are in the flow of the progress of our species, closely coincided or paralleling the evolution of planet Earth. When life was seeded into the planet, from the very beginning, the porpoise was interested because as mammals, we are not so large that we would be threatened by extinction because of our size, and we are not so small that we would be threatened to extinction by predation. We are in the middle size of fish species. Of course, there are other sea mammals that are very important to us and intersect with us. He says, but fish are much less important to us in terms of interacting. We are a very highly evolved species here. We have tremendous mental capacity beyond simply abstract communication. We have our own abstraction in terms of emotions. Primarily, our abstract communication is based on feelings and the co-generation of feelings with each other. Our whistles and chirps that are understood would be understood by every race of porpoise. They may differ in dialect, much as your language would differ in dialect if the same language were spoken in different parts of the world. Essentially, our communication of emotional abstraction, for example, fear, love, happiness, frenzy, or excitement, or any combination of any of those, we could express, for example, a fearful love or a frenzied happiness. Beyond that, of course, we have pictorial communication, what you would think of visualization, so that any memory or event, say a placement of a rock or coral reef or ledge or shallow or river, we communicate that type of information with visualization to each other. Now, we have a very definite hierarchy of individuals within our schools. Actually, there is every type of personality in porpoise as there are in human beings. You'll have your porpoises who have very little interest in cooperation, who may fight just for the sake of fighting. You'll have the timid porpoise by nature. You'll have the mothers and the hierarchy in the feminine order, in all the hierarchy in the male order. Generally, the leadership is assumed by those capable of it. Leadership is not assumed by those not capable of it. We have a fairly accurate way of assessing each other's basic nature. And yes, there is conflict at times between groups in terms of territory or simply antagonizing each other. This may be brought on just for the sake of adventure. In some cases, it is not a destructive urge as much as social interplay, like what you might think of as shadow boxing. But these can be great frenzied exhibitions by groups with each other. And we are an ascending species in our expression. We have completed our expression. We are taking the opportunity for all of the individuals who wish to incarnate to be here. But in general, we are on our way back to source. We have completed our species plan. Now you humans are on this planet are at the crossroads of whether you are going to ascend and complete your mission or not. The other thing I want to say is there are isolated pockets of porpoises throughout universe. There are not necessarily porpoises everywhere there are humans, and there are not humans everywhere there are porpoises. In general, our population is on the decrease because most of us as individuals are complete, and there was no need now to come into physical. In general, there was less focus on coming in than on staying out and participating with our species from outside of physical. We have a very specific and easy way of communicating with our deceased individuals and the deceased from other planets. I have to interject here because what he is talking about are extraterrestrials, what we think of as ETs. And this part really blew my mind because we think we're the only species that have ETs, but guess what? Porpoises do too. Listen to how he goes on with this. We are very much aware of interplanetary communication, much more aware than you are. We are better at it. In your mythology, this is revealed and has been a belief, in other words, about ETs and communication with ETs, that is quite correct. In many ways, our mental capacity for long distance telepathic communication is much better than yours. Ours is much more profound than even in your highly developed Aboriginal tribes. We can telepathically communicate with someone halfway around the world, not just someone 2 mountains over. And so this having been in the species since its inception, this ability to communicate long distance in what you call psychically is honed to a very high art, because our eyesight is not our primary sense. Our mind is the way we operate, the way we grasp reality, the way we interact with ourselves and with other species, much less than our eyes. Because if you think about it, we spend much time in places where there isn't enough light to see very accurately. And so our primary sensory orientation is our mind. The dolphins that are participating in studies and research have a very chagrined attitude toward their handlers, keepers, and quote unquote trainers. They do enjoy the interspecies interaction as much as the humans do that work with them. There is much more of a maturity in our species than yours in terms of the understanding of the placement, the balance of our population, and how to inform ourselves how to survive in spite of humans. There is no cross-species incarnation because it is so vastly different for a sea mammal as opposed to a land mammal. And besides, we can study you. So I ask, how much can you be aware of our experience? He says, certainly the out-of-body porpoises can observe your lifestyle and how you eat and how you go about your day-to-day living, but it is so repugnant and alien to us in terms of the solidity of your environment that we don't observe you much. We have more observers from your species of us. Perhaps that's because you have more to learn from us than we have to learn from you. There is more interest on your behalf where we're concerned. The people who seek us out, in or out of body, can find individual porpoises to communicate with. We also have what you would think of as medicine and an understanding of the internal workings of our body. There are certain environments that are more healing for us. There are certain grasses and physical ways to alter the pH or chemical compounds that are available to us. You would think of it in terms of natural healing. We also have a fairly highly developed imaginary process in terms of realizing sickness or disability within ourselves, within our bodies, and then projecting health on these things. We are plagued by parasites and disease and imbalances. He is now thinking of organ cancers, tumors, and the breakdown of major organs in their body. We are a fairly vulnerable mechanism as opposed to other sea mammals and fish whose bodies are not quite so prone to disease. Obviously, injury is rarely a problem for us. Our physical problems are more commonly caused by a disease that is from within than from without. So there is a great need of physical self-monitoring and connection of physical conditions from within. And normally, when an individual feels out of sorts, it can tap its own mental ability to monitor itself. And once the problem is identified, the individual then can tap another mental ability to assess and understand what to do about the condition. Of course, sometimes individuals perish. We do not tend to interfere too much with another's personal experience, with saving someone else's life, for example, which you have very strongly in your species. We tend not to judge the choice or patterns or flow of another's experience. We do not interfere with one another profoundly. I ask, what are the other things that people can gain from seeking knowledge about your species? There would be the obvious gain from understanding that other species are as individual as you are yourselves, that we all have individual self-awareness. And anybody who studies or interacts with a porpoise in that interaction knows that porpoises are individuals. It is very difficult to have any sort of interaction with a porpoise and not know you are dealing with a fully formed, self-aware, or sentient being. In the sense that you humans are individualized and fully recognize that in each other. There is obviously the benefits of this in terms of stretching your mental capacity, your mental awareness, to include curiosity and recognition of another species. But what is not so obvious is in terms of our mental abilities, that you tend to want to confine to ways that you can interpret them. We are a very happy and jolly species. You might say we exist to play. We are in more or less a constant state of bonhomie, being happy in life, because the time span of a porpoise is only around 30 years. So it's not a lot of time to spend enjoying ourselves the way that you can in physical. As long as there is a planet here to support us, we will be here. And we will certainly outlast your zenith and your decline. I ask, what prompted you to come? And he says, I am near you from time to time. We are the same energy. I am waiting for you to ascend, and then we'll do some playing together.